Hello everyone and welcome back. So I want to take a couple of minutes to kind of add to our previous video on the locate part feature. I went ahead and changed our emulating software. Well, I didn't change the emulating software, excuse me, but I changed our emulator from the 2000 series up to the 5000 series. Knowing that the 5000 series offers us more additional tools, and I kind of wanted us to take a couple minutes to just kind of go over some of those in addition to what we've already done. So as you can see that we have our locating tools and our locating tab that adds PatMax PatMax patterns 1 through 10. So that really comes into play is more of like you have, instead of one PatMax pattern, you'll have multiple PatMax patterns that are kind of working together. In a sense, same thing with patterns 1 through 10. An edge find tool, so it might be something like you're looking for the edge up here on the the line itself, or you might be looking for the edge on the circle. And what the edge is actually doing is it's looking for the variance between, remember there's always going to be 255 shades of gray, and so it's looking for the major difference of the gray. So if you were to zoom in, for instance, let's see if we can't zoom in a little more, the system's going to look really tight on what the major shift is. So if you were to zoom in really tight on this image, you would see that there might be like uh, a really dark and then a dark gray, then another dark gray, and then it's going to transition very hard into a lighter gray and then white kind of coloration scheme. And when it does that, that's what it's going to look for, is that major transition from the lighter dark to the heavy dark. Edge intersection, once again, is two edges intersecting on that. Blobs, it's going to look for basically just a giant blob. So we have a particular image in here that's like the blob of the major circle in the middle. So it's going to look for that blob kind of tool like that. If this had been a color camera, we'd have like a color blob tool. So once again, we'd look for a major shift in like a particular color. So we have like the green run button. If that existed up here, we'd have the green there itself. Circle find, so it might be looking for the physical circle itself. And then compute fixture is just another feature that they have there. So PatMax pattern is a specialized thing. I talked about that briefly in the previous video. It's a specialized patented pattern find tool that exists within the Cognex software in specialty cameras that you would have to special order from your Cognex vendor. It's just it's truthfully it's a more elite version of the pattern find tool. I personally highly like it when it's a feature that I have available to me. If I don't, I just use the pattern tool. But I do personally prefer the PatMax pattern. I have worked with companies that have already worked with their vendor to specialize any Cognex camera they buy will always have PatMax pattern associated with it. No questions, always will be that way. And then others that it's kind of whatever's the cheapest, then generally the cheapest doesn't include PatMax pattern. And so we already kind of talked a little bit about pattern in the previous video, but it's just a simple looking in a search window for a particular model. And once again, I'm going to go back to this and I will go ahead and teach it to that model. And once again, we ran into the problem where it doesn't like this particular part. And so we'll have to do a little more digging on to understanding what that's going on. Once you create it, if you decide you don't like it, don't want to use it, you can right click on in the palette window over here, you can right click on it and click delete, and then it's just going to ask if you want to delete it. We'll talk a little bit more about adding and deleting later on in some other videos. If you want to use an edge tool, go ahead and click add, and the system's going to create these handy little blue edges, if you will, on the system, and those are defined edges that the software sees. And those are again, like I said, the defined edge in that transition of dark to gray to white kind of transition. It's the heavy transition that the camera itself sees. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick one, and then it'll turn purple, whatever one I've decided to use, and then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And so now it's going to define what that edge is, and I can go ahead and increase it, decrease it, whatever. And if I look over here at this histogram tool, it's going to say, okay, well, my thresholds are set at 25 plus or minus from my 0 line, and obviously we're transitioning very heavily in that area or window. In the edit tool feature here, we're going to have the tool name, so we could change the name if we'd like to. We'll have a fixture, so it's what is it fixturing to. Excuse me, so if we'd had something like pattern, we could fixture that to pattern. Had we had something else up here, in our case, because we have no other tool that we could attach it to, it's going to be none. Is the tool enabled or disabled? We have the ability to turn it on, off, attach it to an input off of our control board or off of our direct inputs and outputs. The system then sets a, excuse me, jumping ahead of myself here. You can include it in the job pass. So if you don't care whether it passes or fails, as part of the pass-fail feature, you can take that check mark off, and the system uses it as a find tool, but it doesn't actually assimilate it to the pass or fail feature. The system also assigns it an execution time. So this is how long it's physically taking this feature to execute within that. So you can see it's 0.09 milliseconds. So very, very short amount of time. Edge tools generally take very short amount of time. So that's one of the major benefits of using an edge tool over a pattern tool. Patterns usually take a lot more time because they have to judge a little bit more on what it's doing. You can add a description, so if you're the programmer and you need to leave some kind of information to the troubleshooter, that's a very handy piece there. Settings. Settings is the area where we can adjust our histogram score. We can change our edge contrast. So our edge contrast right here is the 25. If we want to say, well, we need to make sure that that contrast is at least a 50, we can increase it to plus or minus 50, and we can see that we've brought our tolerances up and tightened them up a lot. Edge transition, what that says is that this arrow right here in the middle is looking for, is it going from light to dark or dark to light? So right now it doesn't matter, we have it set to both, so it could be dark to light, light to dark, whatever edge it finds within our search window right here. And by the way, this search window is set right here within the program, so if this part drifts over here, this search window isn't going to see anything because the part is outside of its realm of understanding. The issue with using this edge tool with this particular part, by the way, even if we change our edge transition, what type it is, if we were to set this edge tool to all the way across this part, you can now see that it has caught every single edge in here. Now, we could go ahead and set it to light to dark. We could rotate this to the other direction here. And once again, doesn't matter, it's seeing all of these edges. We've also increased our execution time because it's looking through the whole thing. If we were to decrease it, we've decreased our execution time. Just one of those things that we really kind of have to pay attention to very heavily with using an edge tool is what edge are we looking for? Is there a chance that it'll pick up other edges? Once again, like we mentioned in our first video, part placement is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. Edge width. So this is the width that we're looking for within pixels of how wide is that transition, that very staunch major transition from dark to light or light to dark. So if we were to increase our edge transition, you'll see that our curve here starts to lower because that physical transition from all those pixels that we can't see that are in there tighter becomes more apparent or smaller in a sense that the system is seeing it in that way. You can tell it to find first edge, last edge. So now this is where it gets a little bit handier here, as we could say, let's go light to dark, find the first edge. So now we can go ahead and set the system all the way across this and it's going to look in the direction of the arrow. So it's going to start on the right here, and it's going to look all the way to the left, and it's going to find the very first edge. So that's kind of a feature that could be very helpful. Or we might say last edge. So it's going to look for, again, right to left. It's going to find the very last edge that it sees within there, and that's going to know it's the part placement. Or you could set it as best score, and it's going to find whatever edge it sees first that it deems is the best edge that's possible to use. So if this edge wasn't a very defined edge, but this one was, it'd find this edge. So once again, what are we using it for, and why are we using it, and the benefit to our locating of a part. Okay, Blob tool. Blob. One other feature that we need to talk a little bit about is we can sometimes adjust what kind of shape we're using. So we have the option of using a rectangle, a circle, an annulus, and a polygon. A polygon is, we kind of define it and draw it kind of like you would do something similar in AutoCAD. An annulus is, in fact, let's just go ahead and do it. Annulus is kind of like a donut. We can adjust our inner circle, our outer circle, and we can, I'm not really sure how this is going to appear on our system here, so I'm just going to go ahead and set it to look and see what it does. But it's, in a sense, it's kind of a donut, and so it is seeing a blob of some sort here. And once again, we have some adjustments we can make. So again, it's fixturing to our edge find tool. So in our palette window over here in the results tab, we're able to see that we have our little blue line, and wherever the circle is, that's the tool it's attached to, and this is the tool that it's pointing to, that's using this particular tool. So the blob tool is attached to edge 1, so that's where it's fixtured to. The tool is on. The tool is being used for a job pass function. Our execution time is 0.5 millisecond. Threshold mode is set to auto. We could go in and change it to manual, and we could adjust our threshold. Let's change it to manual. Like we said, we could change our threshold a little bit. Blob color, we could look for black or white depending on our need. We could set a boundary, minimum area, maximum area. So that's the pixel size of what it's going to look for. We can ignore angles, or we can leave it open. And then we also have the option to change our sort by, so area, row, and then row and column obviously are going to get into where our pixel set is as well. There are opportunities to have it as auto, and there are also opportunities to have it as manual. It, once again, kind of depends on your need for your particular application. So in my application, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it on auto. It seems to be functioning fairly well for what I'm looking for. We can transition through a couple of images, and this is where we're going to run into one of those problems where we need to go back to our edge tool and probably set it to, instead of best score, to find the first edge. And then we may have to adjust where our annulus is a little bit too. So one of those kind of features that you kind of have to play with, monitor, challenge a little bit, and understand what it's looking for, why it's looking for it, and some of its little bit of features there. And then once again, the circle tool is going to look for a particular circle within our feature here. So that concludes everything that I have to go over on the locating part section. So thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for inspection of parts.